Welcome to Let's Talk About Health, an informational podcast that gives you insights on health and fitness from experts themselves that you can apply directly to your own personal health and fitness stories. Come join me today to hear all about what they have to say on health and fitness. Hello.
Hey, Vedra, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for spending your time. I know you got a crazy busy schedule, meetings, patients, clients, but thank you
My
so much
pleasure.
for joining me and just doing this little talk show today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I like the coat, the blazer.
Thank you. Got it in Charleston. It's like a good summer, spring,
Yeah,
cool jacket from there.
it's that vibe right now.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it has to be in every psychiatrist's wardrobe.
Oh, really?
Some good blazers. Yes.
Oh, I did not know that. Is it like soothing, comforting?
I just think it make you like seem like that old school doctor that could be over you while you're lying down and looking, but not looking, but just telling you about what's going on with you.
Yeah, I can see that. I think I can now start feeling it.
Ties, though, and inpatient, you got to be careful with ties because they're a risk, like that they could be used as a weapon in inpatient psychiatry.
Oh.
If someone's paranoid or something, they will use it as a weapon. So then you really only have your blazer, whereas a lot of physicians, that's not something they usually have to worry about in other fields,
They could just like pull, yeah, oh my God, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
So you have to be very careful about what you're dressing also.
Yes. But less worried about germs like real doctors, but more about as a weapon to choke you if someone is psychotic.
Yeah.
And the inpatient unit.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Let me start by asking you the main question. What do you think is health?
Oh, that's a very good question. So health is what we try to optimize in outpatient practice, which is basically not just absence of disease, but living your full best life, like mentally, physically, spiritually, I would say. And then, under that mental part, you have like relationships.
Yeah.
You have your inner peace and spirit again. And the mind-body connection can't be underestimated either.
Right. How did you decide to get into mental fitness, mental health?
Yeah, because this is not a field usually like Indian people, Desi people would traditionally could go to. They'd say go into real medicine.
Yeah.
So trust me, I did look into all those fields, trying to make my parents happy.
Yeah.
So my parents are actually both doctors, of course.
Oh.
Dad is cardiologist, mom is neurologist. So they would, often have the arguments, and people would always ask them, which is more important, brain or heart, And I don't know, I was drawn to the brain always. I thought I might either do a neurology like my mom or neurosurgery. But when I went to shadow that when I was at University of Iowa with Matthew Howard, a great neurosurgeon there, and his team, it wasn't for me. Like, it was a long surgery, like 12 hours. I went at like 5 a.m., scrubbed in. By 8, 9, I was done. I was like, I'm not doing neurosurgery. And they had just gotten started,
Yeah.
It was not for me to stand still. And I mean, I have all the respect in the world for those. They're like rock stars to me, or fighter pilots.
Yeah.
And they would say the same about us because, they would say, oh, this is not invasive as much as what you do. We go inside,
Right.
the mind, the soul. But, I was just really fascinated because it's still like a black box. We don't know everything about it, I would say. We're knowing more and more, but still on the, very far from everything. And when I was actually in Army back in 2000s and saw a lot of PTSD in my medical unit, that really did help me to kind of, inspire that passion that like I really want to help this. Like I saw what an issue, like this was real.
Yeah.
I'd never had much experience with therapy or psychiatry before that, or even before medical school, I would say. But I really enjoyed like learning brain and behavior, I thought this is like too easy. Like this is psychology, it's sociology. It's like so fascinating. I was
Right.
like, this is not. This could be like a hobby, like something you learn philosophy, learn sociology, learn psychology, and of course they are like great, interesting fields. But you see in medicine, it gets very siloed. People will treat just numbers sometimes. Uh, Only in our field really you get the most like time to really get a full history, see the whole individual, like a 360-degree
Right.
um around them, like biological, psychological, and social factors. And I really enjoy that therapy part. I think there's a saying, a lot of people go into mental health, they're really trying to solve something in themselves.
Yeah.
I think that going to child adolescent psychiatry, going into psychiatry, like it's been so good for me too as an individual, like you solving a lot of things for yourself. And everyone in this field, they kind of say that.
But I feel that when you said that it's a brown parent thing, I feel that.
Oh yeah,
I
like
wanted to be a doctor
it was
too.
once it started being lucrative, then business, then they would say, oh, okay, like my son does psychiatry, has a private
Yeah.
practice. But on average, like, it'd be one of the fields that's not. And, this is our
Yeah.
parents. They came with nothing, 5 cents in their pocket. And
Mm-hmm.
it was it's very incentivized, like performance and doing the tough things rather than what feels good to you sometimes or what makes you happy.
I bet they must be bragging all about you now.
I wish. How much did? Could you talk to my mom and dad about that? No, I think I think they're starting to come around. Like it's funny because in psychiatry and neurology, we're under the same board, American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. So my mom would have 20% of questions on her neuro exams that were psychiatry, and so even then, though, she would not feel like this is the brain, like it's
Yeah.
this is something else. This is some woo woo stuff. Uh, but you know what? I think a lot of us have experienced depression, anxiety, lack of focus, more and more people over time.
Definitely.
And in that sense, I think it made it less of a stigma. And the younger generation, it could actually flip the opposite, where they're trying to diagnose people with things when they don't have it, and TikTok and stuff like that. So it's an interesting time in our world. But
What do you
overall,
think?
very good for our field, I think, as far as growing and possibilities.
Oh, definitely. I think, like you mentioned, most of them have felt depression, anxiety. I think everybody, at some point of their life, however strong you may be, but you feel those things. You definitely have your lowest points, your lowest days. You go through depression, you go through anxiety for different reasons, but you definitely go through that. And learning to control, or just how you would channel that thing, is very important. That's why there's a huge respect, and like you said, that's why it's growing more and more, because people are getting more aware about those things. Why do you think those misconceptions, like, uh, where do they come from, and what are a few misconceptions you come across?
Yeah, I would say a big one that's, from a lot of our parents' generation, especially, uh, but I think it's still, even you see it in the younger generation, Gen Z,
Yeah.
uh, is this idea like it's weak, to need to get help. So I think we think that like we all deal with lots of tough stuff in life,
Yeah.
lots of pain and suffering, and it's like, why can't you just kind of fix this for yourself or deal with it? And then what it kind of invalidates is that like some people, like genetically, they have way more of those thoughts or more of that fight or flight, or because of their traumas and experiences. And it's a lot of times you got to recognize that it's not personal. It's what they've learned from their parents or their growing up, right?
Right.
And culturally, and especially in our culture, Asian culture, there's this like be tough, pick yourself up by the bootstraps, but just as much as in the Midwest where I grew up,
Yep.
in Iowa, like it was the same thing. So I think it's getting a little less stigma there. Boys still, it's there,
Yeah.
less Definitely more patients in psychology, psychiatry, therapy, or for me, for medication plus therapy, are more women. They're, y'all are more open with being emotionally, um, intimacy, and that's why there's way less problems from women typically than men as far as aggression. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, right? But that's a big one. Is this men don't usually have that space to be. It's a very tough balance, right? Fighting that balance between stoicism and masculinity plus being able to be vulnerable, talk about your emotions. So this is where mental health can come in and help. I think another one would be, like I'm going to steal something from Alex Hormozy, who I love as a businessman, but just even like his take on things, period. He says sadness is when you don't see a solution. And anxiety is when there's too many options. So I think when you can break it down like this, like these are human experiences.
Right.
And so like the answer to sadness or hopelessness is to like get knowledge, and you can find the way from A to Z to your goal. And for anxiety, too many options, like we've all experienced that stress, too many things. But now, like, how do you choose? So you have mental models to make decisions, and then your gut, right? Like, and then you're less anxious right then. And I think these are good in general, like ways to look at these polls. With ADHD, that's a common, being more and more people coming in. There's shortages of stimulants,
Yes.
especially in our state of Florida. A big reason is our society we live in, right? Like things are YouTube shorts, like Instagram. We're on the one we're on right now, the platform. I love it, but it could be obviously for very good, but YouTube shorts, Facebook shorts, like we're in a very kind of low, we're not doing long movies as much anymore. We're not doing long conversations as much typically, and so on. So I think a lot of things in society push us to have more problems here in these areas, and yet there's this like backdrop of what we learned of like, deal with it. Or you're alone with it.
Yeah.
That's another one. Like I'm the only one, so it can make you isolated more, which could be a vicious cycle then, because you'll feel more hopeless and worthless, or more avoiding in anxiety terms, and COVID didn't help that any either. So it is a very difficult time though, like societally, culturally, or where we're at, of course.
You mentioned ADHD. Can you elaborate what's going on? Why we are in, and everyone is, I myself, in the morning when I wake up, I'll go through, even if there's something important on my mind, I'll procrastinate for some time, keep switching apps, like we were discussing. But why is that problem, and what small steps we can take to I wouldn't say prevent it, but at least not to fall trapped in ADHD?
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of it's these, right? They make it very, if you live in your phone, a lot more people are like, if you look at your screen time, it could give you nightmares, for me at least. And a lot of it, we'd like to think it's work, but if you really broke it down, how much is it, right? And so I think this, living in this screen, which we weren't designed to do. Like, I think we're in a social experiment, really, right? For the last, with the internet, is like the last, only like 25 years, really, 30 years. With these phones, like since they came, that's when anxiety, depression, self-harm, even suicidality went up. That's when majority of even young people had these phones in their hands. So there's definitely a lot to that. And I think, this idea that it's strong, or it's good, like successful, you'll be more successful if you task switch a lot and multitask. I think this part, and so we're just kind of overwhelmed. We're put too much on our plate for the time we have, and do as I say, not as I do, because I do the same thing. But I'm trying to actively work on it, with delegating and so on. But I think a lot of it's just the society we live in, especially in America. There's this hustle culture that doesn't help any. So we're all kind of really, we're getting rewarded for performing, and there's more and more things you have to do to get to college, to get to the dream job you want, to get the mate you want, you know, so and so on, and get the position you want in life. And then you have a lot of times in their screens where we normally would have been bored. So I think boredom becomes almost like a superpower. Like if you could go on a walk just with no phone, and that's like a goal of mine every morning now, to meditate. Like these are like very special things. If you could do these things nowadays, like get away from these screens. And it's tricky because we need them for some things and they're good for some things, and some things they're really just adding to our stress and distractibility. So
be more poor. Let's just put it that way.
They what? Sorry.
Be more bored. Just bore yourself.
Exactly. Be more bored. Exactly. Well, just be able to sit and do nothing is a superpower. Like nowadays, like that's where a lot of creativity comes from. And you know, I'm torn on this too with my kiddos that are 4 and 5, and they sometimes get some iPad time. And you know, what I think about is like, Steve Jobs or like Chamath, like they didn't let their kids use the things that they were making. Bill Gates, like they knew that this is not good for them, even though they were monetizing it for millions and billions of dollars, you know. So
yeah, makes sense. I heard term social autism. And it was 1 year old. The parents were, the baby had 1 year old baby had a big iPad that he couldn't even hold, but he was playing and just falling. The iPad was falling, but he was still playing with it. And then the parents are like, I went to go say hi, and then the baby was throwing the iPad at me. And I was like, okay, he's just, tired or restless, or just let him be. And babies usually don't do that. Sometimes, if they're not cranky. And so then the parents are like, no, he has social autism, and we're trying to fight it. So I was just wondering what that means and what it is all about.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there are this subset of kiddos and people that have real autism. And so autism spectrum disorder, it used to be called Asperger's, was like high functioning autism. Then you had like, autism, but now it's just all called autism spectrum disorder. And so this would be in boys more than girls.
Yes.
Definitely easier to pick up in young kiddos. You pick it up like they're not making eye contact. Later as at age, like they're not reciprocating, we say, emotionally either, not so just socially with eye contact, but like emotional reciprocity. They're not, vibing with their peers, and they're more like would get along with adults because they would sometimes they have savant qualities, like they're very later they might, you'll see as they get older, not like baby necessarily, but a little older, they're like very good at memorizing, like if you've seen Rain Man. Or they might know lots of, like I have a few patients in our autism group, they know tons about history or books, and like some are tech, they have a couple of houses here in Ponte Vedra Beach, and they're just like tech gurus. Like a lot of the people in Silicon Valley can really still be successful, monetarily, but they will struggle. Their wives will make them come for therapy because emotionally, socially, it's difficult with them with emotions. So that cost. Now, I think what you might also be referring to is just there's so much time in the iPad early. It's rewiring the brain. It's changing the brain. So people that are actually neurotypical would maybe present neurodivergently. You need the real interaction with humans, with your mama, especially your dad, your siblings, your others, if you can. That would help the development of our not just our brain, but even if you don't have this, there'll be failure to thrive, period. Like the baby will not even grow if you put them in isolation. So we just are social creatures, and we need like real social contact. And it's strange. I don't know if this was happening when I was as much. It was happening so for sure with some people in my programming class and stuff. They would love video games and just stay on the computer all the time, anytime they weren't in class, on the computer, talk, all their social relations are there. You see that more now. I've
Yes.
I've seen that more where people say, I have friends, and they're like, oh, but none I've met. They're all online. And it's not the same. And it's definitely, I think, going to be part of some societal problems as far as like there's less dating, less marriage, less kids. It's not going to help that, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's keeping this technology that was made to connect us can also keep us apart more.
Yeah. I yeah, the backstory to it was that the parents were separated and always fighting, and so they didn't want their kid to see all the fighting and all of that, so they just handed over the iPad. So
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. Yes, a lot of times I think parents, they will use it as a babysitter. They will use it, in this case, it sounds like, to keep them occupied. So they will, it sounds like in some part of it, it was altruistic, almost like, I don't want the baby to see us fighting, but still, obviously, better ways to do it.
definitely, yeah. Yeah.
So American Academy of Pediatrics has recommendations on amount of screen time. And for like 1, 2, it's really just should be like FaceTime with the grandparents. It
Yeah.
should not be, maybe a little educational, this or that, but like really it should be exploring the world. Like that's how they will, and just the communicating with others and just being around social interactions with others.
Mhm.
Like they would pick up so much, their brains are developing so fast.
Yeah. Oh, talking about pediatrics, well, what are the common I wouldn't, yeah, cases that you come across, or what are the common problems that you see with kids? And
Yeah, so the most common things I see with kiddos and teens, I would say, is like they still can present with anxiety often, but it'll be like very somatic, like stomach aches, uh, headaches, this kind of stuff. In fact, I was interested in GI at some point. I was like, and really like the scopes. It was like a video game to me. Going back to video games, I love them too, in moderation. But like this scoping, colonoscopies, and I
yes,
wanted to always work with kiddos. I love kids. Like I have a younger brother, 8 years younger, so I always like just enjoyed kids a lot and wanted to help them, and
mhm,
families too. Even though that's a lot of people's reason they don't go, is they feel too bad for kids, or it's the parents, because and being a parent now, I get it. Like that could be where the stress come from for the kiddos. Nothing's good enough for their kids.
yeah,
And it's just dealing with more stress, right, with more people. But in any case, that GI doc, I got to thank him, because he said, do you like pediatrics more? Because you may not want to go past those 3 years of pediatrics once you go to past med school or internal medicine to go do GI again, the fellowship. So imagine you got married, you had kids, you never know what life holds. You're already like getting to your mid-20s by that point,
yeah,
once you finish medical school, a few years of residency. So do you like psychiatry more or peds more? And pediatric to me could be kind of get boring a little bit, like a lot of well child visits. I love, obviously, our pediatricians. Thank you for them. But to me, it was like psychiatry was always more interesting.
yeah,
It had a lot more. So, and then child psychiatry, he said half of it is GI. And so like, or half of GI is child psychiatry. So like in a way you would be doing a lot of pediatrics still. So he was right. Like you would hear that they go to the nurse a lot, and things like that. Now depression with kids and teens, they will often be angry. Like people will think, oh, they're bipolar, but that's for
mhm,
kids and teens. It's a lot easier to be angry than sad. So
right,
they would often be irritable, but you'll see they'll withdraw, they'll be less motivated. So depression, is next common. Then you have like ADHD, which, like as you said, like it seems a lot higher than the 10 to 13% that is actually because of, we all can have like certain amount of these symptoms of inattentive, hyper impulsive, but it's like, is your brain actually genetically, is it wired in a way that you are predisposed to this condition? And even if you are, there's ways to make it better, like just behaviorally too, like with exercise, doing an hour exercise a day. That's actually another reason that there's so many people on stimulant today, not just the pressure, but the way schools are with sit still. It's like almost a factory style. Like, I love our teachers and our schools, but it could be very, especially for boys who are a little more hyper, a little more rambunctious. I know from my son, like he's that way. My daughter could sit still longer,
yeah,
and they're just 5'4". It's just the way they're wired. Like they by taking away recess a lot in schools, the stimulant would do a lot of what exercise would do, in a sense, or vice versa. The exercise would do a lot of what stimulant would do in terms of calming the person down.
Right.
And you see this diet, if they cut the sugar, cut artificial colors, just eating healthy will do a lot. So there's a lot of things with our American diet that could be better there. More vegetable, more natural foods is just like for everybody is better, and mentally as well as physically. And then you got autism and like other neurodevelopmental conditions.
Right.
Obsessive compulsive disorder is an anxiety disorder that you see in particular, like come on around 6 to 8, and boys more than girls, and you would see that they, lots of hand washing, where they could be scalded, their hands. That's the most common contamination, but it could be about like numbers, like it has to be, I have to do this many times, like certain rituals, superstitions, and then tics often come with that, like movements, or vocal tics. So you probably heard of Tourette's. If someone like suddenly like bang and they might curse, like that's like tics, like a verbal tic and a motor tic. So those are common kind of things you see in kiddos and teens. But bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, those more come on usually around 18 and above.
Right. So food, sleep, exercise really plays a big role throughout their development and growth. They do, but it also helps with mental fitness, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Food. Yeah, food is like medicine, right?
Right.
Like what you eat. If you eat natural vegetables, like less sugar, not overeat, so a lot of people do intermittent fasting, and like for the right, population, like that could be amazing.
Right.
As far as mental health too, in America, I think we'll have too much processed foods often, too much sugar, not enough physical activity, going back to, I think, the work from home and in their desks, and just that switch to that on the farms, or blue collar work.
Yeah.
And then you have, less sleep that come along with the screens, and that there's not enough time to get done everything you need to get done. And that's in school too for the kids, like more and more homework, and for adults, right? And then exercise for sure. Like the people who exercise, like that's probably the best thing you could do if you want to like ward off dementia. You want is sleep, do exercise and sleep well. Like then doing crossword puzzles and these other things like taking new routes and all that next. But we're definitely having like an epidemic really of insulin resistance, from all the sugar going up and down, like crashes, and that's like the predisposing before diabetes.
Right.
And that just leads to energy and mood, changes, and you could see a lot of irritability and depression and anxiety just from that. Anyone that's ever like had a huge meal, like where Thanksgiving is coming, Halloween's even come before that, you get a lot of sugar, like boom, you crash after that. You'll get hyper and then crash, or a lot of caffeine is similar like that.
Right.
And just heart disease and obesity are more common than not right in today's America. So we definitely have some thinking about how we want to, I think, live our lives on a family and society, then towards societal level.
Right. Moving from kiddos to teens, what switch of problems or you come across while you come across cases where teens, they show different signs of depression, different signs of anxiety, like you mentioned earlier, relationship problems and other things. So how would you tackle them, and what are the common causes that they exist today?
Yeah, so the teens basically have had increase, as I said, like depression, anxiety has gone up steadily over the last decade plus, since phones were in most people's hands, and social media is like maybe secondary reason. Definitely didn't help with like FOMO, comparing. So adolescence is a time we're wired in a certain way genetically to be risk-taking, impulsive.
Right.
You're kind of trying to fly away from the nest, but not quite ready, right? From the home.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's this very tumultuous time. Like really only like 15% of teens like go through unscathed, at least in America. And a big thing with that is like now with phones and social media, right? You're gonna have more chance to get bullied around the clock when there's cyberbullying,
Yeah.
for instance, versus when there's just bullying at school. So these things can be exaggerated, like these problems. You can have, you know, we tend to discount the positives and focus on the problems as human beings, the creative beings we are. So if you post a picture, that's what now I like that Instagram was like, you can hide your likes. They
Yeah.
added that in because like this was probably, they know this caused a lot of mental health issues for people where they were like, oh, I didn't get enough likes, or you know, like there's just chances around the clock to feel like less than. And this is really like our chimp mind, our chimp brain, so to speak, which is like goes quicker than our rational mind.
Right.
It's for survival, fight or flight. It's like for adolescence, it's all about belonging. And so if you feel like rejected, and it's a time of like relationships are very unstable, hormones, you know, and then like everyone's kind of going through some tough changes in their life and home, at school, etc. And like that's before all the like pandemic and wars and so on, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is you would feel like a chimp. If they were alone, they would feel like I'm dead, like, because who's going to watch them when they're sleeping, right? Like you need to belong to a tribe. So when a girl says I'm having like drama, like, and I don't want to be alive, I'm having some drama with my friends, like teens always say, it's basically like, to them that feels like death. Like I'd rather be dead, like not literally, but it's so much pain that I want an escape from this life at this moment.
Right.
Like it's so hard to handle, right? And teens, there's what we call the depressive position. They're not yet in that depressive position where they can see like the good and bad. It could be very black or white.
Yeah.
We call it all or none thinking. So a lot of what we call like borderline personality traits or narcissistic personality traits are like part of being a teen and adolescent. So it's a time of naturally unstable relationships, impulsivity, risk-taking behaviors, which could be like drugs and alcohol, like pornography, like risky sexual behaviors. Like, you know, it could get more serious. It could be like drunk driving, you know, happens all these things. And it's like how we're wired. Like a lot of people are very successful today. And I would even admit, like I've done some of these things too. So like you know, a lot of people are successful today, adults, they had these phases as a teen. So you really just want to have parental like supervision of it. Let them make these mistakes when they're at home. Have some level of being able to be honest with each other would be good. This is actually where American families can do better, I think, than some Indian families. At least when we were growing up, it was like very like, no, this doesn't happen. This can't happen. And it would just be like these double lives. And now with American families, they would say like, you could tell me anything, which may not be super healthy either all the time. But it was like more in the step of like, let me help you through this tough period.
Correct.
Because a lot of it is because those parents had often been through these stages themselves, teens, and in like our culture, like they grew up in India, they didn't actually like the culture is just so different.
It is.
They didn't have the drugs, alcohol, like sex for marriage. You know, like it was much less common and much more shunned.
Yes.
Versus here, it's just the norm. You're weird if you don't do those things. Mm-hmm. So depression, anxiety are still huge. Anxiety in young women is the highest like demographic of mental health issues in society. And women are tended to have more neurosis as a personality trait, like just more thinking, more overthinking, more worrying. And we think this is probably like to be a good mom. You know, like when the baby up, like in the middle of the night, like my wife would get up, is she breathing? You know, like, and it might get a little better the second baby, third, but like it was all part of that maternal wiring in our evolutionary psychology, you know. And men can be a little more, you know, they're supposed to be more risk-taking, right? And historically, so you couldn't have worries about and empathy as much or compassion as much for like every tough thing that happened, because it would lead, you know, to the downfall of that tribe or civilization, right? So a lot of it's just we're wired so differently. ADHD, I see quite a bit because of I work in a very like nice area. Like there's certain areas of this country, like DC area, New York, where you are, where I am, Ponte Vedra, Jackson Beach, like the best school district, the best is St. Johns County, where I am, best school district in the state. And, you know, there's high standards and a lot of competition. And this can sometimes be on the parents, not just on the kids, you know, but it could sometimes trickle down. Sometimes it's the parents. And they'd say, you know, they're very performance based. And this can be a very good thing, but it also could be a problem in the sense, right? Because it's incentivizing the wrong thing, which is performance over character, and you know that everyone has value just being them, and that could make it seem not unconditional love, which can lead to anxiety about performing and failing, which could actually be a negative thing, right?
Yes.
In the big picture. So a lot of what we have to do is like reprogram those cognitive reprogram that in the person's mind, often adults who grew up with that continually, and it gets reinforced over and over, right? Or it could be the rewarding thing with working with kiddos and teens is you could change the whole course of this whole family at a younger age. Like the younger it is, actually the better, because we can kind of nip these things in the bud, and like because no parents got this training manual. Even knowing all this, like I would still fall into these traps sometimes, you know, where I'm like clapping when my son makes the basket or hits the home run, not when he missed, you know, and I have to almost remind myself, like, don't do that. But this has led to a lot of toxicity in youth sports. You know, there's even been shootings, like at Popka, where we were recently, went to Disney. It was a 11-year-old shot someone on the football field. Like, I think it just, this pressure to succeed and perform, like, can it's just exemplified that how toxic it can be. There's been more of these kind of cases with adults shooting adults. It doesn't become a kid shooting. It's like from all this pressure to perform, to get a scholarship, to parents often living vicariously through their kids, thinking their kid will be an NBA or you know, the in the Santa Monica whatever symphony, you know, like my kids will be the best, and it could be that negative side, that double-edged sword.
Too much pressure.
Yeah, and I think ultimately that's where I would tell people, like parents, and I you know, remind myself too to do this sometimes, like I said, is tell them, your kids, like, there's 3 rules: do your best, have a good attitude, and love you no matter what, you know. And like if you could carry this with it, like you see the smile light up on their face, on your kid's face, and they would know they could fail, and actually that makes them all powerful, like invincible, because they know, like, no matter what, my mom or dad, like, love me. And you know, I would tell this some parents sometime, and they would like, nope, they got to give all A's. But it was because often how they were raised. And so, but it does create that anxiety and that tension then between the parent and the child, where they get to the teen years, and they may not want to follow all the rules. But if you have this better relationship where you're giving praise for the things they do well, and you're rewarding it, and you're noticing it, and you're listening, then you will have such a better relationship. You're more likely to have that 15% of teens that do well. Like, you know, of course there's genetic factors and so on in that, but I'm just saying in terms of like behaviorally, there'll be less like, there'll be more transparency and just a better relationship, which is ultimately the biggest thing, you know?
I just remembered an incident. I was the one to pressure myself. I was always like, I want to overachieve, I was just a typical teen female. Overthinking always, no, I want to do best, and I want to get A+, blah, 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 just be and I was the ranker of my university, but too much pressure. So my dad is like, one subject, give me one subject where you're failing. Just fail in one.
Go dad. Yes, we have people like this too that are very perfectionistic, and their pressure is coming more from themselves. So people are wired differently this way. Like it might be identity, like this is where I want to stand out, is like I am the smart one or something, you know. And my friend group or at home, like this is because you do get rewarded all over the place for succeeding. And whether it's basketball or school or, you know, being the best in the band, like you will get rewarded for it. So in these homes, it's like the parents are like, no, I want you to go party. like yeah, you know what I usually recommend even in adults and kiddos to do this is like I did this the other day with someone who was like, she was like amazing in gymnastics and then she left it. It was kind of toxic, as it is sometimes in that sport. And she was like not wanting to do anything she couldn't be the best in, because that was how she was wired. Like a lot of people in gymnastics, or just a lot of young women more so than even men are like this, I think. And what happens is you want to really set something like, can you do an activity that you don't care about the result? Like don't measure it, like whether it's just painting or music, like go play guitar, but like it doesn't matter how good it is. And it's a rewiring again of the brain. Like you are good as you are, like as a human being, you have value. And so like you don't have to perform to be good enough. You just are good enough being you. And if someone heard this growing up continually, it would be way more likely to be internalized. So that's something for like, if you're, are you a mom?
No.
Okay, so when you have your kids, if you do in the future, like, remember this, hopefully.
I will call you.
Sure.
Yeah,
I'll
definitely.
give you a discount.
Thank you. What do you think? We were discussing so much about family. What do you think about the family aspect, especially incorporating the competitive helicopter parents, like you were mentioning before? How we could change that norm from a society where the parents are not competing for their own kids?
Oh gosh, this is a big one. Okay. Well, I think it's important to remember, like, a lot of the problems that parents are facing today that they're worried about, like they haven't really grown. It's just we know more about them from like constant media. So, for instance, like my wife, we live like less than a mile from the schools that my kids would probably, if we stay there, they would go to good schools near us. And I said, when they grow older, like they could bike there, because when I was a kid, we'd bike even like first, second grade, like me and my friend, we'd go bike like 4 miles or so to school. Like it would be across the big, like busy streets, then like through bike trails that were empty and there, and so I was like, this is on a busy road, like just on the sidewalk. She was like, no, someone might grab them, so it's like then I kind of went to well, actually statistically there's not more kidnappings nowadays than before. It's just like there is this, it's kind of like a cliche now, like parents don't let their kids go outside as much. It's more at home, and then there's screens to keep them busy. So it's like really restricting their world, and again, like not giving them the chances to go like fail in social interactions or to play like street. We played all the sports in our neighborhood together, and there would be like fights, like not necessarily like real fights, right, but like disagreements, and you would have like verbal fights, altercations. You'd have like sometimes things get heated. This is how you learn how to negotiate these situations. So I think it's important to remember, like, obviously you keep supervision and make sure your kid's safe, but like there's some level of risk to being a parent. And one thing I tell all parents, and again I'll remind myself sometimes too, is it's the most anxiety provoking and anxiety relieving thing, depending on how you take it. So I hope it's more relieving. Is like, we don't matter that much as parents. Like statistically, what we found is like half is genetics, which is basically built in. So that's just choosing your person wisely. But once you have the kids, that's built basically in. And half is like who they're hanging out with, which you could have something to do with that by like going to a nice area. But it's really about like, who do you want your kids to hang out with? Like the top people in school, or is it like the best character people? Like, what do you really want the most for your child, right? Like, because in the end of the day, like what matters the most. But sometimes I think we flip this because of what we see rewarded. When we see Lambros on Instagram, not take a shot at Instagram, it could be on YouTube too, or any Facebook or whatever, Snapchat. But you know what I mean? Like in society, we'll like reward the wrong things, the false idols, as we call it, which are like money, power, status, and like impulsive pleasures, like the things that don't really bring happiness, but are kind of like sugar, just like Halloween coming again. Like it's like sugar for what we think it is. Symbols of that. And then really it's about more like family, friends, like faith, and some, even if it's not like God, it's like, do you care about, like, again, philosophy, Greek philosophy, Stoicism, like things outside of your world, so it can keep it interesting. And you can see it's bigger than your world, right? And just learning. And then work, which is from mainly like the purpose part of it or the social part of it. Meaning, purpose, you know. So these are the things that are more important. So kind of like a lot of the incentive structure we have, though, is like geared almost to those false idols, right? Like that's the like easy stuff, the lower hanging fruit, so to speak. And so I don't know if I totally answered your question. I'm trying to think what the original question was now.
Just
look at parents do, so just what incentivizing character, you know, we call it pride skills, just to give a acronym for your viewers. Because so for young kids 2 to 7, the top gold standard therapy for like behavioral issues, we call it oppositional defiant disorder or conduct disorder. If there's more like criminality, like stealing, setting fires, lying, you know. Oppositional defiant is often like comorbid ADHD, but it's more the behavioral part, not the like neurological, biological part. Just like misbehaving, arguing, and so on, right? At school or home. So the top treatment for this is called parent-child interaction therapy. So basically what we would do is, as a therapist, we would have a one-way mirror, like kind of like you see in TV at the police station when they look and see the interrogation. So the parent and the child, and we first take them through child-directed play, which is like so this is something that they model here, and we give them feedback, and then they practice for the week between, or the 2 weeks between, till the next session. And the more they practice, of course, is when there's more results and you see the behaviors improve. And so we kind of are pushing pride skills, which again, we didn't get a manual as parents. They're not intuitive. Like you have to think about it. So we will try to get them the one that's not being used enough up. And we will talk into the mic in their ear to be like, hey, do more descriptions, more. So like basically, let me tell the pride what they are. So P is praise, and it's like specific praise over general, like not just great job, but like, you know, great job putting, like if you're doing stacking blocks with your son, let's say, you'd say like, great job stacking that block on there. R, reflecting, so reflecting back what they say, you would reflect back, right? And again, this works for adults too. This applies to everybody. If you want your partner to do more of something, you would praise it. And we got to remember this too. It's too easy, but it's easier said than done at the same time. I imitate, you know, so like if in the play, if your son put the blue Lego on there, or my daughter, like she'll play with Barbies and stuff, so she'll do it with, and her version of it, like you would also kind of do something similar with the doll that you have, or the block you have. D, describe, so you're putting the blue block on there, you're building a window, you're building a door, or you're putting Barbie inside the dream house, you know. And then E, enthusiasm, like you want that throughout the whole play to show. So again, it's all positive attention. And this is all we need to do is 10 minutes of special time. We call it a day. If you just do this 10 minutes special time a day, and you try to like enhance these pride skills. So the first half of the therapy for the first several weeks is increasing those pride skills in the parent. And you will then clean up, because it's all for them, just to show love, like unconditional love, basically positive attention. Because what happens is when kids act up, it's often to get attention. Because they would rather get negative attention and punishment over no attention. And so a lot of times with our busy, both parents are working, you know, just so much things happening, we will not give them, you give them an iPad, again, that's social autism. We will not give them enough attention, so they would actually act out to get the attention, because that's how much need we have for that love, right, from our parents. And for attention, like that's the number one thing, is to be seen, right, and validated. So that's kind of what we try to do, is increase. And the parents that don't do it, their kids' behaviors don't get better. And it's like, you got to find the 10 minutes, like that's it, you know. And you try to do it with each kid if you can, and each parent, hopefully, if you could, but at least one parent with the kids. And then the second stage is like the parent side of it, which is like teaching punishment, which is time out. You're removing attention. So, but not physical, you know, corporal punishment, not yelling, so they would and trying to get rid of this toxic vicious cycle of
Yeah.
they act out, so then there's yelling, or sometimes it gets physical, like less I think these days than the past, but it still happens.
Yeah.
And then it leads to more acting out again, and also you're modeling them that physical is okay, so they get more fights, and it's just like a vicious cycle, right? But like instead you're going to put them in timeout for 10 minutes, and like if they got up and get out, like you will just put them back. You will not give them attention. You only will like put hands on them like to stop them if they were like trying to hurt somebody, trying to run across the street, do something dangerous. But otherwise you're not. So this is actually kind of maybe a shift that is happening more for the good, I think, with young people. Like still not enough, right? But like it's maybe even too far of sometimes like having to explain everything too much. But at least it's like a little more respecting. Like with the young people, we might have to. They're not necessarily soft, like people say. Like every generation will know they're soft. It's like no, they just want to be explained to, like and a lot of that might be just from their tech advantage over older people. Like there's kind of a weird shift happening in society there, where like the hierarchies gets shifted in this way.
Yeah.
But in any case, this is just works and for friends and your partner and whoever else. Like if you want to make people feel seen and respected and have a better relationship, you would apply these things, right? Like so it's just we're making it systematized in this parent-child interaction therapy, and that's actually the best treatment to help behavior. So, but you can do this even at teens. You just may not be doing blocks and Barbies. You might be they're playing their video game, or
Right.
you're going out you're just having a conversation while you're getting your nails done or something with the mom, with their daughter or something, like it's still, it's just keeping that communication, that healthy communication. You're still doing things for them, and showing like they matter, you love them unconditionally.
So the principles will stay the same. It just the activity will change.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it may not be exactly like where you're imitating, right? Like in the way that you could with the games with the kids, but you're still having the same idea of like you're enthusiastically enjoying this time. You're doing it for them. And in fact, because what happens sometimes when the kiddos or teens are acting out, they will be at this fissure, and it'll just be this vicious cycle, right? And it will not get better. So you almost have to be like, let's set some rules, consequences, expectations. Maybe write them down, like have the teen as a part of it. And like, of course, the parent, you're in charge, but this is kind of a lot of what it is. It's like with problem behaviors or things like that. It's like we expect some level of this as teen, but of course you want them to learn, like this is all like school, like of life, right? Like we're going to set these rules, expectations, and consequences. And if they're honest, they come to you, they acknowledge doing something wrong. Like, hey, I drank a lot of this party. Can you come pick me up? Maybe you will punish if that's against your rule, or yes, I smoked weed or whatever. Like if they're honest about it, tell the truth, you will give a lesser punishment because you will say, thank you at least for being honest. Like, capture the praise. We learned this when we trained our puppies initially before we had kids. It was like, they would say, capture the praise. If they do something good, be like, good sit, good quiet, just kind of similar idea. Like we could use with people. It's just very like, it's like operant conditioning, rewards and punishments.
It all comes down to old school.
Yeah, exactly. Skinner would be very happy.
What do you think about, what are your insights about family therapy?
Yeah, so family therapy is one of the toughest parts of like psychology, psychiatry, because again, so I think it's fascinating though. Like I think anyone that studies child psychiatry is family psychiatry. So it definitely makes you better with all ages though, because a lot of the mental health psychology is developed early, and that you carry your parents with you, as Freud said. The ghosts in the nursery, he called it. They're with you still, like those voices in your head, like a lot of times it's mom or dad. And so actually I would say one of my favorite things to do with people that helps them the most is do what we call like a genogram, which is like a family tree, maybe going up to between you, if you have a partner and you have kids, even your pets sometimes, because they're like your kids. And then you go up to like your parents and then your grandparents, like generations, and you put all the people on the big board, right? And instead of like just you know, how old they were, what the job was, like when did they die, like that basic kind of demographic information, you put the psychological like patterns that happened generation to generation. Like, okay, mom was closer to this kid, there was conflict between this aunt and this and your dad, like, you know what I mean? And you kind of like, you look at where there's conflict, you look where there's cutoff, like they're no longer talking, and you look where there's like overvalued relationship, like almost codependency. And you see these patterns like repeat themselves generationally. And this is how you see trauma, like generational trauma, if I heard that term. You see it repeat over and over because you're taking those experiences with you. And the purpose of therapy is to bring this into the consciousness so you could make different choices.
Yeah.
And the idea of this is like, when you understand yourself as part of a system, not just individually, like most classic psychology is about the individual. And this is, but there's also this, how you fit in a system, as we're social creatures.
Yeah.
And, you know, whether it's school, whether it's work, it's politics, it's really like big families. So if you first, you're seeing people in their roles, how they were in their family often. Like one is the protector, this one is the creative one, like who one's a superstar. Like you see them bring the same thing with them where they through life.
Wow.
And it's very interesting. So if you can kind of work on yourself within your family, where it's the most emotional valence, as we call it, it's the most difficult. If you can navigate that, understand yourself within that, and at least have relationships with everyone in the family, like where you reach out to them if possible. If there's trauma, then it can kind of, you have to set some boundaries sometimes. But cutoff often happens, and it's like, it could be ego, it could be but a lot of times when you kind of do this, it will get better because people realize like they're not thinking of you less when you're not talking to them for 10, 15, 20 years. They're thinking of you more. And it's just like energy that you're giving away to get a little woo-woo with it. Like it's just taking it, if it's anger that you're holding, if you know, it's hurting you. And so a lot of times it's like, how can you set a boundary, but forgive, to not hold on to this resentment. And then also kind of to see like, this could be why I'm this way because of how I grew up. This is why my parents are this way. Because my grandparents were this way. You know, like you can have a lot of empathy to people. So this is where we call being highly differentiated. It's like if talking to you, I'm seeing the whole genogram in a way, like with you, like you're a product of all these other things in the system. And when you do that, you can even, the people that a lot of therapists even hate working with, like borderline personality, narcissistic personality, you could have even empathy there because you could see, well, there's biological, but there's all this psychosocial factors too that kind of come from their upbringing. Like a lot of, I'll say this, like a lot of people who grew up in the 70s, there was a lot of trauma. It was a lot of live and let live. There's drugs, like a lot of, you know, kids, you know, you would call it today, it'd be like egregious, like pedophilia, almost like just sexual assaults and stuff. You know, it was a lot of these things happening very commonly, and they still happen, of course. And there might have been an uptick recently, actually, internationally. But it leads to then often these, obviously, anxiety, depression, internalizing PTSD. Those are the people who come for help. But then it leads to the borderline personality, narcissistic personality in our society too, where they don't have empathy. And these become then parents, they have kids. So, you know, you can just repeat generationally then, as you see. So that's why it's best to go get help to, you know, if it's not with a mental health professional, like someone in your religion, you know, your church, you can't have your family member as your therapist. That sometimes will only cause problem. You're too close to it to see it, and obviously it can cause issues where they could say, no, that didn't really happen, or something, you know, because it's basically something. It's not personal. It's like bringing up something in them, like I failed you as a mom if I let that happen to you or something, you know. So this is where you can't, and that's where, you know, really therapists can do so much good.
I love the idea, but my question is, with the genome, the genome mapping. Yes. Are we doing it with the teen? We're doing it with the mom, with the dad, with the whole family?
Usually just I would usually just do it with my patient or the client himself, at least initially, because you don't want that to be informed by other people's opinions, right? At first, at least, you want to hear their perceptions,
Right.
because like it's perceived trauma sometimes, right? Like I didn't feel validated by my mom or dad. I felt like they just only gave me love when I succeeded at soccer or when I got an A. If then you brought the parent in, they would just poo-poo that, and be like, no, that's not true. Like I love you, so they get defensive. And so I would always talk with if it's a kiddo or teen, like them first and draw it out. Then I would say, hey, like I might then refer to that. What I usually do is like actually not as much with kids maybe, but more as they get older, like teens and adults, like talk to your family members
Right.
and get a sense of like how it was for your parents or grandparents, because they actually love talking about it usually.
Yeah.
Sometimes they won't because there's so many skeletons in the closet, so to speak, but they usually would like love it. Like, and if you ask why, it's not like, oh, because I want to fix this family or something. You say, or to be your therapist, it's because like, and don't pass judgment on it. Say it's like, I want to just work on myself. But
Right.
the interesting thing is, as you improve yourself, and I tell people this in advance, it will often cause anxiety in the system. If there's any change in the system, even if it's a positive one, it could cause anxiety in the system. And this can be, of course, because like, oh, this person thinks they're too good now, like, or they're being too robotic because
Right.
they're not kind of like acting in on the codependency or the conflict anymore. So it could make someone else feel less than, like almost like if you left them behind, they'll make them feel worse about themselves, or like, something's wrong with them, or like you're being cold. That's a common one. Like you're being cold because you're saying no, like they want you to get, they're used to like love being shown like through argument in a lot of families, and yelling. A lot of families like we yell a lot, we argue a lot, and that's almost how love is shown. So if you were to kind of like stay calm and like let's come back to this later, like let's think about this and come back to it and talk about it calmly, they would almost be upset or something, like like you don't care about them, or because that's not what they're used to. That love was shown to them by criticism or by yelling.
Right.
So those are kind of some interesting points about genograms. I don't know, did that answer your question?
Yeah. But what about the ones that you said, like, while doing this, you are self-aware about yourself? I love that. And I can see actually when we sit down and, like you said, we think about these things deeply, we sympathize with how our parents grew up, our uncles and aunts grew up, why they don't communicate anymore, why they're blocked out, blah, blah, blah. But how do we improve on it? Like, and should we improve on it, or just let things be, just be self-aware?
Oh, that's a very good question. Because of every single day. I did today a few times too. So one big thing is you work on yourself, as you said, like you change, as Gandhi said, like be the change, right? It was the same idea that helped change the world, like change India for sure, at least in the world. Be the change. So don't try to change and fix anyone else. You can't. It would just cause you, like a serenity prayer, which I have like up on my wall and in my home. My mom had at the fridge. And it starts every 12-step meeting all around the world. Every hour starts with serenity prayer, because it's so important. Like the serenity, accept the things I cannot change. It just includes what anyone else says or does. Like, of course, you can influence it by being open and honest and respectful. You can have the best chance if you go halfway and compromise with people, and they're most likely to come back to you. But they could still give you hate, and they could still reject it and then it's not you, it's them often, right? Like, here's the thing. A lot of 90% I would say of how people operate is emotional. It's unconscious.
Yeah.
It's based on like that early childhood, these roles you played, your early experiences. Therapy is there, and some people are very psychologically minded where they've been able to do some of this. There's journaling or meditating and kind of figure some of this out, or have good friends and family they can talk to about it and figure this stuff out. And some are just very introspective, but usually it's pretty hard because we have so many blind spots to ourselves. So what happens is you work on changing yourself with the help of somebody, or doing all these other therapies that we've talked about already. You try to be the best you can be. It will often cause anxiety, like I said, to other people in this system that are feel threatened by that, or like just change. Like change is the hardest thing for people. Like people would often rather feel, you know, like negative thing happening than change. Like that'd be more uncomfortable. They'd rather suffer than be uncomfortable,
Yeah.
like you say. And this is where you see people go in the same patterns over and over of relationships, of, you know, what they're drawn to. It's what we call like a repetition compulsion. The idea is like, I would change this situation, fix this person, then it would fix my childhood. But it doesn't. It's just like a fantasy. So people will just keep putting themselves back and back with like a traumatic situation, alcoholic partner, like, you know, narcissistic or borderline, you know, toxic. And it's really when you kind of confront that, like it's almost, you have to use your brain and mind. That's where therapy can help to like kind of shift your emotional state. But otherwise you'll be drawn to it emotionally because it's comfortable, it's familiar. So yeah, the key is to really see, you change yourself and then don't worry about changing others. They will often then change when it's really healthy. Sometimes it takes time. Then I would have the parents say, oh, I want to come, even though they didn't believe in therapy or mental health. Now they were like, oh, I see my daughter's doing so much better. I see my wife's doing better. Like I want whatever they're having, even though they're still skeptical, right? Because it's a lifetime of, you know, skepticism that was drilled into them. And just they would even be like, hey, like it worked for them. I'm ready to do that work, because it takes work, right? To make that leap, and you can't change anybody else unless they want to change. And this is like another key thing with the genogram and just self-awareness is triangles. This is something I was talking about with someone earlier today. I was thinking, because it kind of comes up for everybody probably every day, is like, you just want to have like as I said, one-to-one communication with each individual on the board.
Correct.
If you look at it like a big board, and not gossip, right? Like because a lot of times the mom, especially in our culture, the mom would talk to you about the sibling or the aunt, and then like a friend, right? Which is fine, like, but if you were to weigh in and like things like that, you would just worsen the situation. And so the best is to be like, hey, like, you know, to kind of neutralize, like, I'm listening, but like I would not necessarily say anything negative about auntie or uncle, you know, or my brother or whatever, right? Like I would just say, oh, okay, like maybe you should talk with him about that.
Yeah.
And so that's when you create good boundaries and like healthy boundaries, and you don't create a triangle, because that's, you know, that's the telephone game that happens too between friends and family. Like, you know, this person said this and this and this, and like it just creates drama, right?
You're gonna ruin so many aunties' life.
I know.
Living.
I'm sorry, aunties. It's so true, but you know, people, they will have more friends and like more positive relationships in the end.
Yeah.
Because that gets around, right? Like ultimately, like people know who those people are that would like talk behind their back, and then there's a trust broken there, and eventually it'll come back, because like gossip is a part of human nature too. So if someone will like eventually bring it back, like you have to assume.
I don't see, although, you know, I don't see the ego break in such people. Like they wouldn't let go, or they wouldn't accept. How do you, I mean, that pisses me off sometimes, I'll be honest. That just sit down, listen. There's a reason why therapy is important, or there's a reason, like, you need to let go of your ego and hear what others have to say, but they're just too stubborn to let those things go. What do you do in such
Mm. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Okay. Couple of things. One is, like, I'm thinking first, when you think about ego, like we traditionally think about like narcissism.
Yeah.
And that cluster B personalities, what we call like narcissistic personality, borderline personality, histrionic personality.
Mm-hmm.
So there's tend to be like lack of empathy and ego, but it's actually low ego functioning, except for the grandiose narcissism. Like a lot of your politicians and you know, bosses, they're going to be like very extroverted, very likable, charismatic, but like, you know, I'm the best at this, but there's still like often an insecurity underlying it.
Yeah.
so they're kind of like boasting themselves, right? Like an arrogance, not instead of confidence, which is like just you could be down to earth and like knowing you're good. So, and then, you know, if you were to shatter that ego, they would disintegrate, like they would rage. We call it narcissistic rage. So you got to tread carefully here. I would say like, so in the therapies, there's a therapy way and then the non-therapy, right? So like, let's just say like in the real world, you want to give people like have them take responsibility. Like I love Jocko Willink, you know, he's a Navy SEAL, and now he wrote a book about ownership, extreme ownership, which I love, which is great as like a leader, you know, business owner.
Yeah.
And you know, he would teach Navy SEALs, he was a Navy SEAL, but he would teach leadership in Navy SEALs. And so it was this idea of like everything that happens, like the buck stops here, right? Like radical ownership. And this is, you know, a thing that I think is a problem these days because victimhood can be kind of monetized, right? So it's taking full responsibility for your life, even when it really wasn't your fault,
Yeah.
which is a huge one. Like yes, you had trauma from, you know, the other kids at school were bullying you, your parents, they didn't show unconditional love always, or were they invalidating, or even worse, you know, you had maybe sexual assault. Like you have all these reasons that you could fall apart and say like, this is why. And you hear this getting pushed sometimes by like leaders, right? And it's not good for society overall. This shouldn't even be controversial though, because like I would say anyone that's successful for the most part, like does have to take responsibility at some point and say, I'm responsible. Like, yes, this stuff happened to me and I can change my circumstances, right? And that includes like, so looking at what happened to you that's not your fault, and working in therapy to remove the shame that you might be feeling that's like actually a cognitive distortion. See, psychologically, we would not want to be victims, actually. So a person who said had a lot of sexual abuse, like I've had kiddos, like sexual abuse, they would have a lot of shame.
Yeah.
Actually, like they did this, but the perpetrator would kind of tell them that, but, you know, keep it a secret also. But like, you know, even if they didn't, it would just, this idea of like, I did something to bring this on myself because I didn't fight back or something. And that's just actually the trauma response. It's like a freeze because it's scary. And like, we have to really like kind of get in there and talk about it slowly and carefully, of course, treading, you know, with a mental health professional that knows what they're doing, to really kind of like go unpack that and be like, well, did you really like want, like, was it really that you wanted that, or was it that you couldn't push back because of like the way the body responds to trauma, and like kind of really unpack that, you know? And so there's a piece of like, there's people who feel shame about things that aren't their fault, or they need to like forgive themselves, even if it's something that they did do wrong. And the idea is like, forgive yourself, but learn from it and grow.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and so that's the idea with therapy, is like, we're not trying to you're not wanting to beat yourself up for it so much as like learning from it and growing. Of course, if you did something immoral, like if you want to live the best, like Stephen Covey said, like in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, like be principle centered. So to me, that's like the North Star, like being character integrity centered,
Yeah.
not performance, or, you know, with all the things like rewards that come with that, or even family. Like most moms, like they'll be like families first, you know, which is good. But I think even before that, you have like principles, because if your child did something wrong, you would still want to tell them that they're wrong. Like even if it hurt their feelings, for instance, like you would put that character thing over even family, right?
Right.
So it could get tricky when the values seem close, you know, but ultimately, like, you would want to work with people to, if they did something wrong, like you would want to feel some guilt and shame. Like a psychopath, a sociopath wouldn't. A narcissist, like they may not actually feel bad. They don't have that empathy,
Right.
or they you know, their wiring could be such that they don't know, it's warped, at least, right from wrong. But that's when you get into the, you know, psychopathy and sociopathy, which are interesting topics too. But it's like, okay, don't beat yourself up, but what can you learn from this and grow? And then you have to make amends if you did do something wrong, right? Like, and accept that. And that's part of but like, you know, most people's big successes come after failure.
Yeah.
So you got to like keep that big picture in mind. Like, you will actually grow more if you are humble and vulnerable enough to really try to work on yourself and figure out what could be better. And like, if things aren't working out for you the way that you wish they were, like it's like a sum total of all your experience till now. If you want to change them, like you got to change yourself.
Yeah.
You got to change your circumstances. You got to change yourself. So making different decisions, but often like Carl Jung called it like you could kill the old self almost and create a new one. And therapy can do that. And there's like just going through tough things sometimes can do that. You go to a Vipassana retreat for 10 days, like it can do a little of that, like just, there's an interesting paradox. Things that are difficult, like hard work toward a goal, exercise, cold water plunge, you see is very popular these days. It increases dopamine. Painful things increase dopamine. Impulsive pleasures like watching porn, playing video games, substances, they're going to increase the dopamine in the short run, but then it's going to crash. You're actually going to have more pain from it. So there's like things that are like impulsive pleasure actually going to be lower your dopamine in the big picture. Whereas like continuing having goals, that's going to be actually a continual dopamine.
Right.
So it's like a paradox, and you see that like obviously play out in society a lot of times.
We were discussing about trauma. What are your inputs about PTSD?
Yeah. So PTSD, trauma has been really my obsession over the last several months, because just seeing more and more of it, and like how it wasn't necessarily getting better for people as well. Like, even though we have lots of great treatments, and this kind of led me to a pivot to doing more psychedelic assisted therapy.
Yeah.
I'm starting with ketamine-assisted therapy, which is very effective, gold standard for treatment-resistant depression, but even helps like PTSD and as well as addiction and pain. So it's been around now for a couple decades, but it's getting a little more mainstream. It's the one legal in Florida. Then you have psilocybin, MDMA, like they're getting more studies. All the big universities are really jumping in this space, and the whole like industry really. I think there is a pivot happening, and it's funny because these are actually agents that have been around since like the 60s, 70s, when they were doing experimentation of LSD and like just the whole like Woodstock era was like love, peace, and it was like a lot of these drugs were commonplace. But now it's like, oh wow, like these are really good agents to like for healing. And so I've really like dove in, done a lot of ketamine assisted therapy, and even building this community really like locally and just nationally and internationally of people who are interested also in this, to like make the process the best it could be for trauma. Because what happened is, normally like I'd work with some people every week or two or monthly for like years, but they would not have as much gain as like with a session or two of the psychedelic and doing the therapy, because the psychedelic would allow like you to go past those defenses that we normally have. Part of PTSD is avoiding the triggers, avoiding even talking about it, what's happened to you. So people, even though they seem okay, they would never really go totally underneath and massage the knot of the trauma that was causing them to continue to have like panic attacks, like in the body. Like we say, the body keeps the score. One of the best sellers in recent years in trauma work. The trauma will go into the body, cause more like physical health issues, but even the fight or flight, like heart racing, nausea. We got a lot of IBS, autoimmune conditions. Like a lot of them are based in trauma. Actually, physical health conditions, medical conditions, in later life, like the ones that are responsible for most mortality, they're increased by trauma, early childhood trauma, more than even psychiatric conditions.
Right.
So this is something I learned from Dr. Porges, who lives nearby, Steve Porges, who developed, and his daughter Lourdes, who works at University of Florida. They developed the safe and sound protocol and the polyvagal hypothesis. So they're neuroscientists, and that's something I really learned more from him, more and more about. But so we all kind of put our heads together. What's the best sorts of therapy? There's EMDR, the eye movement desensitization. Like, can we pinpoint the path of the trauma and disconnect it from the depression, anxiety, the PTSD? You could have the memory, but you're not, having a panic attack or getting depressed or when you have that. Today it was really rewarding. Like right before I talked to you, I did a ketamine therapy with somebody I've been working with for years, and like to see real. She said for the first time since she was 14, like she's like 22 now. First time since she was 14, she was able to hear a song that reminded her of like, you know, a traumatic partner from the past, like kind of set off like the original kind of trauma that happened for her was with a ex-boyfriend, and then it led to several other things, you know, because it wasn't totally dealt with. And she said I was able to finally hear this song that reminded me of that, and not like walk out of the grocery store. Like I was able to hear it, had chills for a second, and then it went away. And the reason is because during the ketamine therapy, there's an ego disintegration.
Yeah.
There's a feeling of connection that the drug does. So it alters the consciousness in a way that you are able to like have a dissociation experience, but that taps into the unconscious, which is where a lot of the, you know, you can rewire the body and mind. That's where a lot of the memory is, but it's very Freudian psychoanalysis, psychodynamic therapy in that place. And then afterward adding in like art therapy, as my friend Amy Petrelli, like she teaches me about ITR, which is like a derivative art therapy for trauma that she's certified in, that increases that optimizes the therapy further than even talking about it is like art, because it's a whole brain activation. So just kind of we're trying to put together the best process, me and trying to build this community up, and it's growing. Like a lot of people are very interested in this. I think it is the future of our field. Less suppressing with medication, which obviously has its place still, and more, because not everyone can do this therapy, and more like evocative, like let's actually go into the darkness and actually process some of the things that have happened. And it literally, going to your question about ego, it's ego disintegration. Like you are going inside and you are going to have empathy even for the person who did those things.
Yeah.
And that would actually help you move on, because they're no longer like the boogeyman with you. You would say, oh, they were only like 16 at the time, and they had a family like that, and kind of some of the same concepts from the genogram again. It will go back to empathy. And then a lot of people, they say those psychedelic experiences, that's where they really realize what life was all about, because you feel this warmth, this love and connection feeling, and you realize that that's what it's really all about. And they can take that with them often, you know? And so this is really like what's powerful. And then there's just lots of neuroplasticity, a lot of growth factors get activated by this as well. So suicidal thoughts can go, but it's also like just psychologically, socially, like lots of change can happen. So you really can have lasting results and not needing to put medicine, you know, and just kind of reduce symptoms. You could really like get to the causes of these root causes of the symptoms of depression, anxiety, PTSD, and lower it because you processed it through an exposure. And these other things just kind of make it even more pronounced, more accelerated. And so that's what I'm about. Like, what's the best treatment that has lasting results? Not where it's just like a temporary fix or you're forever patient going to therapy forever. Like, how can we get people like really better and not have these situations again?
So you think like art therapy? I was reading about music therapy very recently.
Yeah, music too.
Yeah.
So we do the music during the ketamine sessions. And I mean, there's like separate just art therapy, music therapy, because again, they're art and creative pursuits, like they activate the whole brain. So when you process things, exposures during that time, like it's going to be a greater healing, because left brain is really, you know, talking is really only activating mostly left brain. But when you do like music, art, creative things, you're going to right brain. And that's why meditation again helps so much too in itself, like a form of cognitive behavioral therapy that can really like, well, and also just the phenomenology, we call it, like what's happening, the experience in the brain, the phenomenon is you're disconnecting the brain. Like as much as we glorify the brain and the mind, and this, you see this in the ketamine therapy or meditation, as much as we glorify the thoughts in the brain, especially in like Western society, like it's really like you're the soul, like you're not your brain, you're not your thoughts. A lot of our thoughts are like irrational. A lot of our thoughts are not helpful. So that's the purpose of like cognitive reframing, which I've done a lot of work with. I've put it out on I've posted about it. You know, if anyone's interested, reach out. We could go through, because that's like the first thing that's easy is just like, what are your thoughts when you're anxious or down? And let's like reframe those. And you can then help your anxiety or depressions. This applies to everybody, but like the amount of self-defeating beliefs you have, like everyone has some, you can help that tremendously just from that. And when we kind of combine it with the psychedelic on top of it, now you really can even have more, we're dissociating like the thoughts, like they're not having thoughts anymore so much. It's the brainstem, just a lizard brain of like fight, like where the body is like feeling these physical symptoms, the emotions, and it's really in the unconscious, and that's really like the self. And so as much as we glorify, this is actually still a line I really love from Mo Gadot. He wrote in his happiness equation, and also he's like, working on 1 billion people happy since his son had passed, and he had said this beautiful thing of like, as much as we talk about like, I think, therefore I am, it's really I am and then I do. Like I am and then I think. Because like he talked about a study where people, when they kind of had disconnected the thoughts, they actually had done better decisions and performed better. Because of we call it like our gut. Like they're literally, our mind includes like our parts of our brain, our spinal cord down to our gut. So we say our gut says this, like you have a gut feeling about something. It's actually very powerful because it's like unconscious. That's your unconscious. Like we can only retain like 4 thoughts or something at a time, like not a lot. So we have to like store away like a lot of our experience. And that's where like literally there's neurons down to our gut. So, a lot of young people say, oh, like we want to have logic, like I need logic, and I would not go with my gut. And it's like, it's really a balance. Like, in fact, you would really always want to validate with your gut,
Right.
Because that's like telling you something deeper, like from your larger experience and context. And, the women tend to be a little better at tapping into that. I think that's sixth sense because of the nature of being, men traumatizing women. Honestly, like probably like women needed to have this superpower stronger because of guys being bigger, stronger, and all that.
Right.
Go back to evolution. Whenever you have a question of why things are the way they are, go to evolution of what it did for us to keep going.
It all comes down to old school.
No doubt. No doubt.
What are a few techniques or ways I know we've been talking so much about art therapy, music therapy, a few other ways that we can control our triggers that we've been talking about, just control it or process them in a better way?
Okay. Controlling our triggers. So like the first thing I think of was like coping skills, right? Like, so you're saying, I guess, can you give me an example of like a trigger? Like, because there's like different kinds of triggers.
We were talking about trauma. People don't want to scratch to the real trauma. They want to talk everything above it, not beneath it. So when someone is bothering our trigger and we've been triggered, how do we like, it's fight or flight. Either but how can you do it in a better way? Sorry.
Yeah, right.
In a better way.
I missed that about New York. the constant noise and energy.
You should come visit.
I do need to. I haven't been since many years since we moved away.
Yeah.
I have to go back. I'm going to take my kids, actually. We made a plan to take them for sledding. Hopefully there'll be snow.
Yeah.
In the winter. So
this time it's going to be real bad snow.
Really? Okay, good. I'll actually like wish for it. Sorry for you New Yorkers who don't want snow.
This weekend is going to be the first.
It's good, minus the driving part, and the slippery and the mushy and dirty. I guess there are a lot of things not to like about cleaning the car.
Not the good stuff, though.
No, but the sledding part's a good part.
Oh, yeah.
And just the feel of Christmas. You don't get that feel the same here in Florida.
Yeah, I wish I was in Florida during December, January.
Oh gosh. Maybe we can switch for a week.
Yeah.
We'll switch for a week.
You can let me know if you plan to get your family. I'd be more than happy to have you all.
Thank you. Of course.
Yes. So like the trigger, how do you, it comes out as anger most of the times, but usually fight, because we don't want to show that we're feared, or so how do we process it? How do we control it?
This is such a good question. So I would say like your partner had cheated on you, right? Like if anytime you see them talking to someone opposite sex, let's say they cheated with someone else too, you would maybe have trigger like anxiety come up or get angry.
Right.
And it would seem like an overreaction, right? At the time, because like, I was like, oh, I'm just talking to this other lady who asked me a question. But
Right.
it might, this is actually what happens to people all the time. Like there's, as I said, 90% of how people operate is unconscious. So the idea we try to do in therapy is to bring that to the conscious. Like, this is why, like, it's not about this situation, it's about something that happened before. And so then to be able to communicate that in a healthy manner is the key, right? Because what would happen is like the person would overreact and yell, or they would, and then, you know, the person say no, they get defensive, and then it would create like a fight, and then it could create toxicity. And, you know, you have other elements of this happen too, right? Like, say someone was sexually assaulted, sorry, trigger warning, sexually assaulted, then like they're gonna have trouble with intimacy, and sometimes they will what we call turn passive into active. They will become like the woman, become like the man, and like they will be in lots of like you know, what do we call it, just superficial relations. They would actually prefer that. I hear that all the time, like, because it's like they would not be as hurt, or they can kind of be in control, whereas before they felt lack of control, like they're doing something to feel in control. And you know, now they don't feel like this, they just feel like it's their body, like they don't have the emotional, something about the emotional numbness of created that happens with PTSD again. So of course going to therapy and like bringing these things forward and talking about them or would be good, right? Like, so we can process it in the right way. And there's, as I said, several types of therapies that can then help. But you know, I would say the biggest thing is communicating. Like, then there is a little trick from therapy that people could do for themselves. I think that even I learned in my own therapy, to be honest, because like every good mental health provider should be seeing their own therapist, and I did certainly since I was in residency. It makes you understand like what it's like to be on that side of the couch, you know, that other side on the couch. Also, like, you learn what works and what doesn't, and can test things, you know, like with yourself, and also of course just make your life better, because we have so many blind spots to ourselves. We can't treat ourselves or family as I said. But one thing I learned that really helped from a therapist, Rose, is when you feel, she didn't necessarily say it this way, I think I would kind of put something together with what she said, but what she would do, which was very good therapy, experiential, is when the person would feel a certain way in their body, like even if you're talking about this situation that happened, right? Like you see your boyfriend, he's talking to another girl, for instance, that one, like you're angry. So like even talking about it in the therapy, she would kind of stop and say, how are you feeling your body right now? Like, so you could do this for yourself, like check in, what am I feeling? This is how anxiety feels to me. So when we say cognitive behavioral therapy, we're talking about like a triangle: thoughts, cognitions, behaviors, actions, but also the physical symptoms of your body, the behaviors of those physical symptoms, and then mood, like whether it's anxiety or depression. So these are interrelated. And so on the body side, what you feel, this will then create a thought, and then it'll be related to anxiety. Like a lot of anxiety is in the body, right? The fight or flight is turned on, and then people with PTSD, it's hard to turn it back off, because we are like have this for survival reasons, to flip it up, flip the switch when it's time to run. It's everything to run, right? Like your heart beats fast, breathe fast, shallowly, your muscles get tight. That's why you can get like sore, like your neck hurts if you have too much prolonged stress. It's just too long, tight. You know, stomach issues, GI issues, because it could be not diarrhea, IBS, like diarrhea, constipation, because just nauseous, butterflies, right? Because it's like you're not in rest and digest. All the blood is shunted to your heart to pump to your muscles to run from the saber-tooth tiger, like evolution again for survival. And now what happens when you have a trauma is this is just flipped on, like most of the time. It's hard to flip it off, this fight or flight, to get to rest or digest. So then you get prolonged issues and stress and medical conditions. So what happens is, so you know, just talking about this situation, thinking about it, you think, okay, you check in with yourself. That's called mindfulness. To me, I think this is maybe a strategy I semi-created based on lots of things, but it seemed to work for me at least. So like check in with yourself, like this is what I'm feeling, mindfulness, and then, and that's okay, like show self-compassion, like that's a key part of that, is to not judge it, just this is what I'm feeling.
Right.
This anxiety feels like this, or if I'm down, like sad, it feels like this, and just kind of like check in with that. Now ask yourself, so there's the cognitive, which is just the here and now, like what's my thought, and we can reframe it. But like to go deeper, where did this thought come from? Like what does this feel like experientially? Like that's psychodynamic therapy, to peel back the layers and really help peel those defenses. And this actually has longer than cognitive behavioral therapy, maybe not on the symptoms as quick, evidence-based, but like longer gains of like on relationships to reduce defenses. So you would ask yourself, like, what does this feel like? Okay, this, often there's some like early childhood experience, or like if it was like a cheating or affair, it'd be like remembering that situation. And sometimes there was previous also before that. So you would kind of go to the earliest ones, and often that's like with at school or your parents, right, or guardians.
Mm-hmm.
And you would say, okay, this feels a lot like when, you know, I was 8, and okay, let's say for this example, you felt betrayed by like your mom took your sister's side or something. Like there's a similar feeling of like betrayal. And so now like it would be, you would say, okay, what do you see? Okay, see your early self, like see your early Bob. No, I know I'm not saying you've been in these situations, but like see your 6-year-old Bob, and like what do you see?
Right.
And like you would describe it, and you would see her, she's sad, she's not feeling, she's feeling betrayed, she's feeling rejected love, like this,
Right.
you know, sad, like hurt, and it's coming out as anger. And then you would say like, all right, what would you want to tell her? And you would say something like, you know, you didn't deserve that, like you are lovable, you are good enough, like that person, you know, made a mistake, or that person's problem because they're insecurity or want to build their ego, whatever, right? Like it wasn't about you, like you are good enough, you don't deserve that, and like I love you, you know, that kind of thing. And then, you know, now you feel like that inner child, like it's healed a little bit, because like what's reacting is this past memory getting triggered, so you're kind of healing that memory emotionally, and that really has a lot of gain in therapy. But I really feel like it's something that I think people could do for themselves if you really think, you know, spend some time in quiet, be bored, and like get to into yourself, and like what. But I think most of us have this, really, this memory, these memories stand out to us, because and this one way we heal PTSD is to like fill in the gaps of these memories, like what's the context of it, the full narrative, like just by what I said, like in a way, like, well, he had like insecurities from his childhood,
Right.
and you're showing him empathy, like, you know, in a way of like, it wasn't about you, it was him, and like you did the right things, and you know, you're kind of putting in the whole context. And then when you have exposure, like, so going full circle, cognitive behavioral therapy, when you have exposure, like see something over and over, let's like when you face your fear over and over, it gets almost boring, this narrative.
Yeah.
And it no longer has that power over you, so you can put down that like weights of like trauma that are like shackles that are holding you down, you know, you could put them off. And that's kind of one way is, and then also reframing those thoughts you had that are like distorted, of like shame, like I'm not good enough, or I did something wrong, and sometimes it's because of what other people have told you, and it have to be reframed. And again, it's not to make, and you know, there's nothing wrong with anger per se, but you don't want to, of course, hold on to it. But sometimes you have to have that initially to even, you don't want to be afraid of anger, because otherwise you would not even want to go there to like make it better.
Yeah.
Like that's the way to get better. And it's like any grief, it's not just death, it's like any transition, any big change, whether it's like, you know, school, work, relationship, death, it could be any of these, like you're just changing your health. Like there's a grief, even if just saying like I'm depressed, like there's people get secondary depression or secondary anxiety, like they're depressed about being depressed or anxious about being anxious. You almost have to have a grief, like you have to almost process it to go there into the darkness, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then that's the only way to get, as we say, to the other side of the tunnel, is through it. You can't go around it. But the people who try to just bury things under the rug, then they will continue to have like, overreactions and explosions, and or internalize it as panic attack. Either externalize it like that,
Yeah.
or and acting out, or internalizing it, right? Like depression, anxiety symptoms, people pleasing. So that you have to really like go there to be able to heal it, and know that that actually will make you stronger, and that's strong to be able to do that, not weak.
Is it okay to do it by yourself, or do you need a therapist with you to guide you and say the right words, or just motivate you, or you're good?
I think it depends on the severity, right? I think honestly, I think everyone would benefit from therapy,
Correct.
because like everyone's got like stresses and like blind spots
Mm-hmm.
to themselves, and like really therapy is about getting to maximal health, to go to the first question.
Yeah.
How can you not just reduce your symptoms of depression, anxiety? Like not everyone has like some symptoms, right?
Yeah.
But severe for like a depressive or anxiety disorder or ADHD, but like they have stress, they have self-defeating beliefs often,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's like perfectionism or like spotlight effect, like mind reading, just different things that kind of affect them. We all have some, and it's just human. And to be the best version of yourself, right? To be self-actualization, and Maslow said was the highest, aim, and that was really to like know yourself and then try to become all you can be, right? So a lot of that getting to know yourself fully, like I don't think anyone could do that on their own as well as they could with a good therapist, right?
Right.
Because like there's too many blind spots you have to yourself, and it's just like having a good teacher for yourself and a coach. It's a coach, like an accountability thing. Like people won't do that on their own either. Like they won't do that, the heavy work, and you also need to be pushed like with a good teacher, a good mentor, like a good coach, right? Like just like anything, the guide will get you further. And even for like transcendental meditation, a proven meditation technique, like there's a guide. Even if you go do psychedelic therapy, like in Costa Rica, ayahuasca, there's a guide. So you need someone to do the integration with you, to make sense of what's happening, because you're going to only see it in your way that's distorted with bias.
Yeah.
And the same way, it'd be hard to work with your family or someone close to you. You're too close to you, like, so you can't. So the Freudian psychotherapy was about, let me provide like a blank slate so I could kind of reflect back to you, a mirror, like objectively. So I do think the psychedelic therapy, I've noticed, like really because of that ego disintegration, does allow people to almost see themselves from a 50,000 foot bird's eye view in an interesting way. So that's another reason I think it works so well, while also increasing this feeling of connection, which is what it's all about, to heal the depression, loneliness epidemic and stuff, especially if you want to talk about that. That's a big one. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, you really do need a guide in some form and therapist, but not everyone, of course, has the same degree of symptoms or problems, right, or challenges. Right. Some are doing like, everyone's biologically wired different too, in terms of like neuroticism, like how much thoughts and worries they have, and then you got like the experiences they've had, and even so, there's a lot like that's not all free will. That was like
definitely
that out of our control that happens, and we're just trying to make the most of it after that. But I don't think anyone could really do as good as they could with a good therapist, with their introspection work and growth.
What do you think is sympathizing with your partner? Like you said, if we understand what's going on, actually what happened, and just sympathizing even with their bad behavior, what's the difference between that sympathy and actually being in a toxic relationship?
It's a good question. I would say, obviously, it's a tricky situation, which is an individual decision about if it's toxic or not. But I'll try to kind of create some boundaries to, if I can, the best I can. I would say if the person is okay, yeah. I would say no matter what, even if you broke up with them or not, right? Like in this partner, let's say in this situation, because a lot of people have had these situations happen. So you would still want to ultimately not like hate them. You would want to be like, what led them? Because kind of controversial, but often it takes two. You would want to see, what did I do that contributed to this? Like, what did I not see? There was often red flags. You might have been drawn to this toxic relationship because of your past that you need to heal still. Otherwise, you would just go to another toxic relationship, right? So it's like wherever you go, there you are. There's a saying. So you would take yourself again, and that's what we were talking about earlier with repetition compulsion. So, but you would still want to see, like, so you would forgive, because holding on to hate and anger, because you see people after divorces or, you know, breakups, they would be like bitter for like decades and never move on, and it's like not healthy, like, right? And so they could have like, how much different positive, like loving years could they have had, you know, because of holding on to that resentment, and it almost like becomes their identity or something. Interestingly, that can happen with people with mental health, like it become their identity, which is rather than something they want to heal. And so you would, if you kind of continue to go back and not try to work on it and make it better, then I would say that would be toxic and like insanity, as we say, right? Like trying to do the same thing and have a different result. I'd say if they continue to do that and it continues to make you lose self-respect, or like it's because some people are, like I said, like bringing themselves to want something like this because it happened to them in their childhood, not consciously, but unconsciously, like it's familiar to them, or they don't feel like worthy of like a healthy relationship or something like that, you know? But they would, usually their self-esteem will continue to drop, and because, you know, feeling not enough, betrayed, this trauma, it's really like a trauma, a PTSD that can come from it. And if they're not like kind of going to counseling and trying to like actively make this better, then they're going to continue to wear on them. And if they're staying for kids, the kids eventually going to pick up on this tension, this energy in the house. Like it's going to be more damaging than helpful, even though normally like having, you know, two parents is better for the children. But if it's toxic like that, where the energy is negative like that, there's resentment and bitterness, then it's going to be worse for them, right? Because they're picking up all that energy, and they're also observing like, this is what intimacy looks like that's going to often lead. That's where a big reason there's less young people wanting to get married these days, they say, because there's so many kids of divorce or seen like these problems happen, you know, in their families. So it kind of made them lose faith in the institution, unfortunately, which tend to be the best institution for child rearing, is to have like the two parents, you know, traditional is mom and dad, but it could be, you know, any LGBTQ parents too. And then having that makes them feel safe if that's solid. And so that intimacy, that unconditional love between the two parents actually helps the children so much, makes them feel safe. And I'll give a John Gottman kind of high yield item, because he was like the biggest researcher for relationships. He studied all the relationships, and he has so many books and YouTube video, TED Talk that has so many views about what led to relationships to work and not work. So he just studied thousands, you know, several of his books, and it's used often in couples therapy. There's Gottman trained couples therapists, even like a whole brand of that. So what he found was the biggest thing that determined like if the couple stayed together or not, and it was a good relationship or not, they felt still in love or not after decades, was the amount of bids or calls that the partners gave. So bids or calls are like anytime someone reaches out, says something, or does something, like makes some gesture to the partner, like do they validate it? So not they say agree with everything, right? Like but just at least acknowledge it and respectful. Like I could say like the sky is blue right now, it's dark at night, and you don't have to say, oh yeah, okay, it's blue. Like, but if you say, look at this idiot, like, you know, that's going to be not answering the bid. If you say, oh, okay, that's interesting, what makes you say that? Like that would be answering a bid, even though you don't agree. So you still should be open and honest and respectful, as we say always. But to like be respectful like that, and just paying attention to the other partner, going back to kind of the pride skills.
Yeah.
The same ideas of like, it's just attention, you're seen, you're appreciated, basic things, but they're like easier said than done, in the sense of like when you get busy,
Yeah.
it's easy to get, what about my, like, I'm not getting enough praise, and this is what you see, like that leads to breakup, divorce, eventually death by 1,000 cuts, this disconnection over time. So he said he saw that 80% of the bids or calls were answered in the successful relationships, and it was like the opposite, like 20-40% when they didn't stay together. It wasn't, and they broke up, it was, or divorce, that was really the biggest factor.
Right.
So it's about paying attention to the other person,
right.
and like listening and basic things, but reflecting back and really paying attention, being an active listener. And like listening in a very distracted world today can be, of course, like a superpower again, being an active listener.
As long as you're working on each other and the relationship, it's not toxic anymore. Right?
Yeah. And I think, yeah, absolutely. I would say, like, are they working on themselves? Because often it's not like each individual has to do their own work.
Right.
And then there's like the work between each other. And this is actually the best. Again, this is like, some couples say, oh, we are together all the time, but that could actually be very unhealthy, codependent, almost.
Yeah.
Like the best is like, all right, with the time you're together, it's even better, but like you each have your own friends and your own hobbies and your own stuff, too. So it's really like this combination of individuality plus we're together, better together. And there is sometimes like absence, makes the heart grow fonder, as far as like not being together all day. This is what we saw a lot, especially since like the pandemic.
Yeah.
Working at home, like there's a lot of fighting. There was a record number of divorces. Like I know a lot of the divorce attorneys around like the community. They would tell me like during the 2021, like you would see like record divorces because of all the time together at home.
Right.
And like, so almost it's a big ask to say like live together with someone for like 80 years. And so it takes like some like love gurus, coaches. The one that was one big founder for Match, I think, Dr. Ruth, like she said she lived in a separate place. She was like, fortunate to be able to have that privilege, like to live in a separate place from her husband, or not her husband, but her boyfriend, a longtime boyfriend now, because like it would keep the spark more when they would be together and stuff like that. So there's like, something to finding the happy balance, like most important things between not ever being apart, or not being together all the time and not being apart all the time, right? Like just finding that happy medium that works for you guys.
Yeah. So the norm of taking a break is actually healthy and not unhealthy.
A break for how long?
Not talking about personal experience, but I've just heard my friends actually say, no, we don't want to take a break because it's only going to tear us apart. And I'm like, you should actually try taking a break. And I didn't tell the term like how long, but at least until you have settled into your new apartment or you have focused on your career, and that's good enough space that you're giving each other to breathe. So you can settle in and then come back stronger.
Interesting. Okay. So you're saying like within staying with as a relationship, they both agreed upon it. I think that's the key, is the communication. Ultimately, like, because you see all types of relationships these days that are acceptable, and obviously, some are more successful than others in some ways, but talking about like traditional monogamous relationship, and then you have like more the polyamory and just other types of relationship, open relationships, and so on these days. But which is actually going to more like how it was primitively, again, when you think about evolutionary psychology. So what I would say is like, the key is there's a communication, they both agree upon it, right? And that's because everyone's different, and you would be honest and transparent with each other. And then so if you're saying it was a break, like defining that, because otherwise, I don't know if you watch Friends, but otherwise you could have a Ross Rachel situation. We were on a break, and having this back and forth thing, and then they took them decades, I think at least a decade to get together, it seems, but like because of this thing. But
Right.
I think that's key, is just like have that communication piece, and but yeah, having like your own hobbies, your own friends, and trust is important, right? Like there to be a trust that if my partner went out with their buddies, or they had like a girls' night or guys' night, you could be faithful to me, and you won't have to be there the whole time. And because if you aren't, then what kind of relationship is this? Like you're just it's just like almost not helpful to you at that point. It's like causing you more stress and damage. It's again, it's like a part of your need for control. In
Right.
fact, like it has to be some level of, again, serenity per acceptance. Like I can't control what anyone says does, but if I bring my best self to this relationship, make myself the best I can be, and show up, then I'm more likely to get the other person to want to also.
Right.
If and if not, like they need to work on themselves if it's a problem like that, like, or it's just not meant to be, like it's not for whatever reason, right? So those are kind of the biggest points, I guess. I had another one for couples, but it kind of slipped my mind now. It'll hopefully come
Back.
to me.
We'll circle back to it.
Couples therapy is very interesting. It could be, it's because people are playing out their child. Like you have to start with their family.
Yeah.
They're bringing, again, like the roles they had in those families, their traumas, they're bringing it to this relationship.
Right.
And we call it like the transference, the unconscious feeling you have to someone.
Mm-hmm.
It often, you see it again when you have kids, like again, like you would be feeling to the child, to your parent, to the spouse, like sometimes it's a similar feeling, and not always the same sex, like not always mom, wife, daughter. It could be dad, wife, it could be, but it's like the feeling you get with them. And so you'll play out, again, you'll seem like an overreaction, but it's really because you're responding to them, like because you're responding to the other, what it feels like.
Subconsciously.
Yeah, unconsciously. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's very important to pick up and realize, like, oh, when I touch them on the, like I kind of made a touch on them, like I kissed them, and they kind of, like it's not a rejection of me, like, again, it can remind you of something from the past. Like that's why it seems like more. Mm-hmm. It's not, and it, because that could happen to people, or just other kind of situations that come up like so frequently, like, and it's important to set time to like talk and communicate and even have conflict, but do it healthy. You don't want to do it with like toxicity of like cursing each other and yelling. Like, how can we make it healthy? Like checking in with each other and knowing you're not going to agree on everything.
Right.
But like we're going to respect each other and hopefully have like similar values, at least. And those are the kind of the main things.
Do you think it's important to hold on to your past? At least because we're trying to heal and move forward, but we should also look at the past and how we grew up, who I am today is because of what I was and what situations I saw. So what's the right amount of moving forward but holding on to your past?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it's so true that you don't want to live in the past.
Yeah.
Because that's just like depression,
right,
or anxiety, and you don't want to live in the future. You want to live in the present to have a better future.
mm-hmm.
But we have to look at the past because it's just like history, so we don't repeat the things we don't want repeated, and also like because these experiences like formed us to understand ourselves and to understand others. We look at the past of how we got to be the way we are, so then we can first of all, like, so we don't overreact to situations going forward. We might have respond appropriately. We would have like a reaction, but we can kind of quickly mindfully, okay, take a breath, deep breath, and then recognize like, okay, this isn't about this, it's about that past thing. So the more you get to know yourself, the more you'll, in your past, the more you'll like kind of be able to process those things.
Right.
So I had a therapist, Dr. Barcy, great guy, he just an analyst, and years back, and he told me something that was great. He's like, when you have a regression as an adult, or it could be even like older teen or older kiddo, if you have a regression, like not acting like the father, the husband, the professional you are, or fill in the blank for you, it's because there's something that was left unprocessed from childhood. And it's so true. Like I would try to like find exceptions, and like there couldn't find any, because it was always like, oh, okay, like I'm responding to that in this way because of this past thing. And it's often with your parents or like early childhood experiences, because a lot of your personality is formed at those 0 to 6.
Yeah.
And so like without going back there, you would continually just be reacting to things and not knowing why, and just continuing to self-sabotage. It's only by being able to like identify those causes that make you less ignorant to yourself and like not reactive but responsive, and you're gonna have healthy relationships and just better decisions. And this person is like a stoic and just a good leader, and so on, and you can actually be the husband, the father, the professional, or the wife, the mother, the professional you are, like live up to your highest potential. It's only because you've processed all those like touch points in the past that contribute to where you have regressions currently. You would prevent those like acting out. At least you wouldn't act out and cause cause yourself self-sabotage damage.
Yeah, because
your relationships.
Would the gut be playing a role in the memory, like you were telling me before, that the gut, it'll store all the memory that you have. So healing, would it also be related to the gut? Will the gut also feel that you're healing and you're doing better, and now you can move forward without repeating, or at least feeling those things as intensively as you did in the past?
Yeah, I would say so. I have to think about this for a second. The gut involved in healing. Yeah, I mean, in a sense of like, if you are able to like, again, what does this feel like? Then you can get into that unconscious, and that's like stored in the gut. But you will have a gut. It's interesting. Like, I think here's how I look at it. You will have a gut reaction to a situation, and you might react, but like, it's good to look at why, because you want to then look at it with your brain, which is God gave us this tool to look at things and see like, like what is this right or wrong, right? Like this is just a tool to use. So you could then investigate like, oh, am I reacting because of some trauma I had in the past? Or am I, is that my gut telling me that? And like, this actually happened a couple of days ago. One patient of mine, like he's very successful and the wife is too. And, the family, neither of his families were very tight knit growing up. And now they're like in their 40s and they're wanting, he's like, I'm good. Like they're successful. They can travel wherever, whenever. They're both very successfully monetarily and everything. But like, they're not have very tight families with their like family origins. And they don't know if they want to have this kid yet. And it's like, all right, they're in their 40s now. So it's like, they're going to have to probably use science to make it happen, like IVF or something, unless they're lucky, kind of thing.
Right.
Based on the testing. So one question I had for him, and so I think these are just things you have to pose yourself. You can journal about it, reflect on it at the beach or the mountains or in your meditation or just in the shower sometimes, right? Things come to you when you're less thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's like, do you think you're not wanting kids because you didn't grow up in that right family that where you're going to Disney World and you were having the young brother like I had, like where I was like, I know I want to be dad, because you had that experience. Or like if you had grown up in a different family, you would, like, is that enough reason to not do it or do it? You know what I mean? Like, should you be making the decision based on the past you had? Like, you know, it's not the worst thing in the world. Like, kids are actually, on average, they're said to make happiness go down for a relationship, because like you can't go travel whenever you want, you know? But it depends how you look at it, right? Like, I think the meaning and the purpose part, like, yeah, I don't think I'll go with the Jordan Peterson. Hopefully your audience, you know, don't too much hate me for this, but like a Jordan Petersonism of like, we shouldn't be optimizing for happiness. We should be optimizing for meaning and purpose, because happiness is too low of a bar. Like, because things like that, like, you would make you less happy to like be up all night taking care of your baby, and rather than being able to just go travel with your partner to like Bora Bora, but you know, and deal with their colds and their flus and all the things, and you know, it doesn't stop, of course, with different kind of things, but like you'll never have the meaning of like passing on, you know, legacy, rate of raising good kids that we then go in the next generation and so on, right? Like, and also like just being able to, you know, it's like an evolutionary thing again, right? Like, be a part of that. Like that could be one of the biggest purposes you have, right? So, but one of the things was like, he had said he had a good experience teaching kids, like as a coach or mentor, and so like that was rewarding. And why? And like, okay, and so like just trying to figure out like what are the things that are little tests you could do because you didn't have those experiences growing up, and this kind of applies to lots of things. How could you test like if you would like it, because you didn't have that experience before, so you don't know it that you're gonna like it,
Right.
But because a lot of fathers and moms too, I'm sure, like it's like once the baby's born, they're like, oh my god, like mostly like they're like, oh my god, like this changed my whole life for the better. But like, you know, and some were like, oh god, like this is so hard, and you know what I mean. So it's like, you want to test things, just like if you have a job, your career path you're trying to go for, you want to shadow in it, you want to test it first so you can downsize your risk, especially for something so big and important. So I think like how your gut feels, like then you'd want to investigate it and be like, okay, why does it feel this way? Is it because of some trauma I had and that's keeping me from doing something that could be beneficial to me now, like getting on the stage and giving a speech that could be very helpful to me and my cause and career, you know, and doing good for the world. Like if I'm talking about like mental health, how to improve it in the world, like if I'm not going on that stage because I had a bad experience, which I did, like my first time I got on the stage and danced, when I did dancing growing up, like getting on the stage, the first time was stage fright. If I let that stop me, then because my gut's like, no, like, you know what I'm saying? So I think there's some things you got to like process and work through, and you got to look at like what those are because of what you value.
Right. I would very much like to see the Cindy dance though.
Oh yeah, we definitely had the Punjabi, Sindhi, all different type of Indian dance. It was just Bollywood. Done Bhangra dance. Even our wedding dance was like a good, like a Punjabi. What do you call it? Like the Bhangra Empire kind of dance. So yeah, it's very fun. I retired my dance shoes. I'd like to say, but maybe you could find some of that old footage somewhere.
Okay.
In some camcorders
I'm
or something.
Stop talking then.
If they're still around, Mom. Destroy those.
Okay, you have any last words of advice for all of us?
Gosh, so many. Okay. I would say live in the world in the present. Try your best. Like make sure, as much as responsibilities we have, you know, I would say try therapy if you're wanting to learn more about why you act, you know, why you respond to certain things the way you do. Like get a therapist that you click with and vibe with. If you don't like it, you know, it's just you find the right fit, you know. If it's not the right fit, don't just, a lot of people say, oh, then go away from therapy. And it's so clear that they could benefit from it, but they just hadn't have a good experience with that one. So it's like, you know, there's lots of places you can get on Psychology Today, Google. You can contact me. I'll try to help you in any way if you need. On Instagram. I'm at Dr. Enhance Psych, a DRENHANCEPSYCH, and then my LinkedIn's like Raj Loungani, LOUNGANI. You can reach out to me anytime. Yeah, biggest advice I would have would be to be in the present. Like, make sure you're spending time exercising, try to sleep well, eat well, basic things. Value relationships. Like, again, from the psychedelic experience, people recognize like this is what it's all about: love and connection. And so after like character, it's like relationships, and this is the quality determines the quality of your life. And when we go into people's unconscious, like the texture of their mind shows this like consistently, that this, because we're all like interconnected.
Yeah.
We're all individually unique stars, and we're also interconnected as one. And so when you recognize this, when you have an experience like that, if you're interested, reach out to me. We could talk about ketamine or their psychedelics. I could talk about this stuff all day and night, honestly. How long have we been going, by the way? I could talk about this all day and night, and I do frequently because I love it so much. But we probably need to do another one just because there's so much more to say. But which I think applies to like people all the time, like all over, and because psychology is just like so fascinating.
Yeah.
But I would say, have those in-person relationships. Put down your phone. Look in the eye, like, because it's good for you, it's good for the relationship and your mental health. And then, just because you've been through some tough stuff doesn't mean it's like a thing to hold you down.
Yeah.
Like, everything's mindset. So it's like, this stuff's happened to me. Like, again, get help. Like, come get help. Call a mental health professional. You could start, obviously, call parent, teacher, a friend, a sibling, and so on. Like, and then, but hopefully, eventually, get to the right help where you can like sort through what's happened to you, process it, and learn from it and grow, because it could be your biggest, actually, superpower. And we always have a choice of, like, we don't control our thoughts. Some people say, have positive thoughts. I don't think we can like control our thoughts, as I said. It's like if I ask you, what's your favorite ice cream? Like, what's your favorite ice cream?
Favorite.
What's your favorite ice cream? Yeah.
Between vanilla and chocolate.
Okay. Did you choose that thought, or did it just like pop up?
I think I chose it.
You did? Okay. I mean, like, if you asked me my favorite movie, first thing was like Braveheart. Like, I don't even think about it. It's just like a natural like reaction, and it's like a lot of neurons, a lot of different things happening on a biological level.
Right.
But
I was gonna say, because I'm not such a sweet tooth, so I was thinking.
What's your favorite color?
Red.
Just a wrong question. Oh, there you go. See, like, it's like you don't think about it, you just choose it.
Yeah. Okay.
Or you don't think about it. You don't choose it. It just comes. So like, but then you choose your action, right? Like, you always control how you respond to a situation. As you like, it's the cliche. It's like a trope, really. It's like the quality of your life is not determined by what happens to you, but how you respond.
Yeah.
So these traumas that have happened, these tough things, like, show empathy to others, because everyone's going through something.
Right.
And what we find, like, some traumas, we're not comparing, but try to live your life. Don't compare. That's key. We always look to the up and to the right, like above us, like, but that's where you feel unhappy. Yeah. It's just like we discount the positive. No one's like looking back and be like, oh, I'm actually got more than all these people in this way. Yeah. Like, it's always like not enough. And that's just like part of the human condition, which is like an interesting thing that we could take a whole hour on itself, of like happiness versus ambition. It's like, if you had no expectations, you would be happy. But like, and people that are successful tend to have ambition. Like, so kind of one thing I would say there is like, put an ambition just slightly above where you're at, like, and so you can meet it. And if you fall short, of course, you try your best and you still move forward, or you learn something and you grow, and then that'll lead to success ultimately. If you keep trying, you don't quit. So that's the kind of the biggest things. Take responsibility for your life. Like that itself helps your happiness, saying internal locus control.
Yeah.
And there will be a lot of people saying like you're a victim of this and that could be like a part of the ego too, like to externalize. But as we all know, like when we are with people who are like, no, it's my fault, like my bad, like I'm responsible, and they're only the ones that change their life and change things in the world, you know, and we respect those people. So that's a big one, I'd say. And just give people love, you know, like especially your family, obviously your friends, like you go halfway, be open, honest, respectful, and you'll mostly get good back, you know, and set boundaries if you've been hurt, you know, and just keep yourself safe and such. Like you do sometimes on the flip side, do set boundaries because you learn from those lessons from the past, again, why we look at the past, so we can learn those lessons and grow from it and heal. So there's a lot of tough stuff going on. I'm actually going to be volunteering to help in Israel. Had a meeting today about it, about all the
to hear.
Yeah, there's a lot of they might need like PTs and other providers for sure. Like they have physical medicine, like you work with a lot in rehab there, trauma surgeons and forensic pathologists, which tell you all you need to know. I mean, well know about all the atrocities happening in the Middle East. You know, so Gaza and Israel, like there is a need, and so I'll probably be doing like Zoom meetings because those therapists have had just generations of trauma.
Definitely.
You know, going back to the Holocaust, even before that, just from both sides. And so, you know, it's a time I think of like love, like having empathy, you know, be the change, I guess. Can't change the world. Some people, we just need to take a news detox, like a news break. Like we say, sleep hygiene before bed, like screen hygiene. Make sure, again, we're having in-person conversation. But sometimes if you're stressed, like take a break from social media, take a break from news, you know, read the facts, because like a lot of our thoughts, like they monetizing fear and weaponizing it often, like with politics or the news. These emotions, these strong emotions, even the algorithms like control for those, right? So it's important to recognize like what's in our control, serenity prayer, and you know, it's good to care about bigger causes, but always keeping in mind, first take responsibility for what you control yourself, and then you know, the family and so on, and build from there. And remember the true idols and the false idols, again, like family, friends, faith, which doesn't have to be just God. Again, it could be like spirituality. It could be just believing in, you know, things outside your life, because it would be pretty monotonous and boring if it was just our lives only after a while. And then like work, and you know, even if it's volunteering or just finding purpose in some way, even if you're retired, finding things you can do to keep yourself occupied. Like, and sometimes that's people aren't meant to be alone. That's the thing. There's a loneliness epidemic happening, especially with boys. A lot of reporting not having any friends, more than ever. And so like as connected as we are as ever, there's like a loneliness epidemic happening. My mentor is Patrick. That Dave was talking about it yesterday. Had a whole thing on it, and it's just like every day you'll see different things about this if you look on YouTube. And it's just like that's the depression, anxiety, like isolation, loneliness in itself creates changes in the brain that are increased areas of anxiety and depression. So making sure to stay connected, and not always have to be with people 24/7, but finding that balance where there's some solitude, quiet time, boring, journaling, art, cooking, creative outlets are always good. Music, just meditating, exercise, like those things. And those are kind of some of the big ones that came to my mind first. And just be kind to others and respectful. Let's do that.
That is so much needed. I am so happy that you are going to be helping people in Israel, given what situation they're going through, and at this time, where they need people like you to talk, just to communicate, and the smallest thing is going to help. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, I mean, as I said, like in Gaza, and they just have to have the NGOs, the non-government organizations, cooperate with US, like, so that take a little longer just because of the way our nations are politically. But Israel, like, they're very appreciative of the help. So if there's other like physicians and probably the other allied health professions, I just know more physicians, they're very appreciative of the volunteers, because we're talking to the interior defense, over there, and they're making emergency orders to kind of have that help, and it saves a lot of lives right now, and the thing that's we're all the world's watching. And I know you got a lot of healthcare providers watch your show, so anything you do to help. I think H1 is a really good place to start. If you look them up, New York, they kind of have a lot of connections to the Middle East to make that happen. So because those therapists over there, like in my field, but even the other doctors, they're like overwhelmed. They themselves are have PTSD, and they're like helping people who've been through the worst atrocities. So just for all the Middle East, like we all want, peace for them.
Yeah.
And to try to help them through, and because they're going to be like resulting, speaking of trauma, right, so much for thousand people. So, but it's happening all over the world.
Definitely.
So, yeah. So I think this is a great field for anyone that really has that heart and empathy and wants to help people in this way, like to give psychiatry a look as well.
Yeah.
For the young people.
That you are going to be inspiring so many people who are into mental health and mental fitness, and I hope that they are educated enough that they can help others go through what they're going through, and in a healthier way. And we always ignore mental health, which is not supposed to be ignored. It's supposed to be talked about and worked on. So that's one big change that I am seeing in our generation, and I am so glad that there are people like you to support it and just guide us in a very educated, healthy way. That's more important. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here and talking and
thank you, Bob,
about mental health and fitness. I'm so grateful. This was one of the best lectures that I've ever had the opportunity to speak with or just to conduct. So thank you so much.
Thank you. You asked really, really good questions. Made it very easy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope they were not so difficult or tricky. My brain can...
Wow. No, I just enjoy a good challenge. But yeah, no, I think we covered a lot of the ground. So for a good initial interview, or initial conversation.
We're doing
discussion
series out of this. I hear more. I want to just sit and talk and just listen to how and different ways that we can work on. And we need so much work, and people need to sit down and listen more and work on themselves more. So we're doing more things.
Thank you. And I want an update on that couple that was on the break.
Well, I'm going to talk about it.
I appreciate you. I hope you have a good rest of your night. And sorry for keeping you up so late.
No, it was perfect. I'm worried about your kids.
Oh, hopefully they're asleep.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll go check on them. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Thank you for listening to our talk about health. You can follow me on Instagram at bhavna.devnani, on Facebook at bhavna devnani, and we'll leave all the information in the description below. Thank you.